That's right. I'm back. They let me back. Yeah. And if you're here this morning, it must mean you don't have a boat. So welcome. So no, Wilson, I know you guys, you have like 3 or 4, you have a whole fleet of boats. So I know that doesn't apply to everyone. But so yeah, I'm Robbie. I'm one of the pastors here at Shoreline, but that is not where my journey started here at Shoreline Church. I actually started in a preschool ministry. I did not want to do the preschool ministry, but I'm a servant. I'm selfless. And no, no, I did it for, I actually served in preschool ministry for 4 years until transitioned out. And then I helped to lead our sisterhood several years ago. And I did that with Pastor Darlene. And every year we took women from Shoreline or women from this area, and we went to a conference in Jacksonville, Florida at Celebration Church. How many of you, do we have old school Shine ladies that went to the conference? Anybody? We have at least one. We have more first service, but it's old school. We used to do that so much back in the day. I've been here at Shoreline for 11 years, and but I heard they're bringing it back, so I'm excited. So that's how my journey kind of started. But one year when we went to Shine Conference in Jacksonville, our group, we took 50 people one time. We took 50 people. That's a big deal because you guys know, for women to be able to go out of town to do anything outside the home, you have to set it all up for the whole family. Everything has to be left in line, right? So that's a big deal to be able to take 50 women out of town for a weekend. And so our group, every year we like to sit up top. So Celebration Church has an arena, and so there's some stadium seating, and our group like to kind of look down and be able to have the best seat. We consider that the best seat in the house. And so one time I was headed to the restroom, and I believe this is probably why I don't like public restrooms anymore. I was traumatized because when I was headed to the restroom, I'm taking 2 stairs at a time. I'm going down the stairs, and then I trip in front of thousands of women. There's thousands of women here. And I'm telling you, I didn't totally wipe out because of course, right? But I definitely, I had to rock it out or whatever. And so, but then I go to the restroom and I gather myself. And then I come back, and one of the women in our group, she let me know that she saw me. Right, and so of course I'm mortified, but I knew there were witnesses. I already knew that, but that wasn't enough. If that wasn't enough to mortify me, what she said next actually shook me. She goes, "Now we can be friends." Is this girl for real? Now we can be friends? I don't know about you, but in that moment, I didn't feel like that was such a compliment or this thoughtful invitation to friendship. Like now all of a sudden I get to be your friend because I tripped, right? And I mean, anybody with me with that? Because it bothered me for a while. It would really annoy me. But the thing is, I can't blame her. For a split second, she got to see Robbie the human instead of Robbie the robot. Just for a split second, she got to see my humanity, because I am someone, especially back then, several years ago, I was someone that I want to feel put together, I want to look put together, so people don't know what I've been through. And so she never had access to me in that way, but for a split second, she got to see my humanity. And so this girl didn't know my story. See, our story is who we are because of who we were. And she didn't know me because she didn't know where I've been and what I've been through. And our stories, all of us, each one of us, we're made up of different experiences and cultures and families, and you put it all together, right? And it's so much in between all of that. We put it all together in a package, and that is who we are. And so some of you probably minimize your story, I bet. You probably think, and I was probably one of those people where it's like, oh, there's not much to my story. I haven't been through a lot, it's not traumatic enough, or it's not that unique. So, who cares, right? So you might minimize your story. Or you might be someone and maximize your story. It's too reckless. It's too much of a hot mess. I don't want to let anybody into the most awful parts of my life. So, you blow it out of proportion. You exaggerate what your story is and how it actually can help to impact someone. But today, I have a couple of questions for us. Who are you? And what's your story? And so, like Pastor Graham was talking about, we are in this series called Straight Outta Corinth, and if you haven't watched it, please go back to watch the first 3 weeks so you can catch up with us, of course. But while we're following along, pull out your Shoreline Church app, and you guys can have access to all of the scriptures that I'm going to talk about today. But in week 1, Pastor Graham gave us context of the early church, and he told us about this man named Paul. And Paul, you guys know, especially if you've been here, that man has a story. He has a story, but we don't know like all the parts of his story. We don't know like how his upbringing or anything like that. But when we catch up with him, we start to see this man has to have a story because hurt people hurt people. And he was such a bully. And if you remember, Paul used to be Saul, and he made it his mission to stop the followers of the way, or new Christians, new Jesus followers. And I don't know what happened in his story to make him like this, but I do know he has a story. We now know that Paul had this radical shift. He had this radical change, this experience with God, and then eventually his name was changed to Paul. And that happened in the book of Acts. But then he goes on to plant churches all over. He's a church planter. And this is the same guy that didn't believe in who Jesus was, the same guy that didn't believe in what Jesus stood for, same guy. But he actually ended up being such a valuable teacher of the movement. And so where we pick up in Corinthians, he planted one of the churches in Corinth, and it was planted, but you know how it is. Anybody been a new follower of Jesus, and then you're reading your Bible every week, you're on fire for God, you're drinking the Kool-Aid, you're going crazy for God, but then we become human. Then we're like, okay, I make mistakes still, or I'm tempted to stray, or I want to do what I want to do, right? And so that's what's happening to the Corinthians at this time, and Paul is trying to show them, he's trying to remind them, stop that. He's trying to redirect them, and so he wrote 1 Corinthians, then he has to go visit them to try to show them, right, some hands-on training possibly, right, but then it's like, okay, you still are not getting it, so I'm going to write you again. And so we are going to pick up in 2 Corinthians because they need more training, and that's what he wanted to do. And so Pastor Graham first week had talked about this beautiful invitation that we have when we decide to follow Jesus. We get to rest in the safety of God's love when we decide to follow Jesus. But then there's also this challenge, the daily discipline that God calls us to. And Paul actually, the Corinthians didn't believe him, or they questioned his credibility. They were so attracted to super apostles, the leaders. They felt like they had more clout than Paul had. There was more money. I imagine, they're probably, how I imagine it in my mind, they're probably super handsome and tall and strong and all this and right? And everyone's like, we want to follow them. And so Paul, he could have totally gone down his list of credentials, right? He could have went through all of his accolades. He could have boasted about what he's been through and what he's been a part of and how many churches he's planted and all the people that he's helped to change, but he decided not to. And in 2 Corinthians 12, we find out why. And so that's where we'll pick up 2 Corinthians 12, and it'll be on the screen. We'll start in verse 6. Even if I should choose to boast, I would not be a fool because I would be speaking the truth. But I refrain so no one will think more of me than is warranted by what I do or say, or because of these surpassingly great revelations I've had. Therefore, in order to keep me from becoming conceited, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me, but he said to me, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses so that Christ's power may rest on me." And it won't be up there, but later he finishes verse 10, "For when I'm weak, then I am strong." And we're probably familiar with this concept, right? But I want to point out, hopefully this is a different perspective to take as we go through this. In verse 7, let's look at that, where he says, I don't want to be too conceited. I could tell you all the things that I've accomplished, but God actually, you know how God actually looks out for us and does what's best for us? He allowed a thorn in my flesh. This thorn that I don't really want. And we don't know what the thorn is. It doesn't tell us what the thorn is. And I think this is such a merciful thing. This is so cool that God, in this word, we don't know what the thing is, what the thorn is. And so I think that's probably because of 2 reasons. First, because how many of you would be comparing your thorn to Paul's thorn if you knew what his thorn was? How many of you would like, oh, his thorn is way bigger than mine? He has 10 thorns, I only have 2. Or vice versa. My thorn is bigger than his. Or I have more thorns than he does. And when we're looking at thorns, it could be a stumbling block or something like that, or we have issues, all that. But another reason why I think this is purposeful, like this mysterious thorn, we don't know what it quite is, because I believe that is probably not even the point of the thorn. Like us knowing what the thorn is not the point. The point here is the purpose of the thorn. The purpose of the thorn. And so, because like I said, we all have a thorn, we all have a stumbling block. There might be something that keeps sticking with you, whether it's in your heart, in your mind, or something that someone else has put on you or anything like that. We all have that. But for our purposes today, I want us to focus on we all have a story. Okay? So what's the point of our stories, though? Let's figure that out. Let's keep reading. In verse 9, there were 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. 3 times. Why wouldn't God take that stupid thorn away? Why? He asked nicely, I'm sure. I'm sure he asked so nicely for it to be removed. But here, again, it's like God is like amazing because he gives us what we need regardless. But I love that we have this reminder of, okay, I'm not going to remove the thorn. Here's why. Possibly, this is my take on why he might not have removed the thorn, is because he probably wanted them, or wants us, he wants to show us that we shouldn't hide our past, or we shouldn't keep our story hidden, right? Or we don't want to forget where we come from, what we've been through, those milestones in our lives, those times that we learned something, the times that we grew. And so we keep it there as this option or this evidence that something happened in my story. And so God's still trying to show Paul in first part of verse 9, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And see, that's the formula here, like my power is made perfect in weakness. If our story is who we are because of who we were, then it's probably within our story within our story, we have the greatest capacity for God's power. That's how he needs our story. He needs the dark parts, the good parts, all those lessons learned. He needs that in order for his power to be perfected. And you see, Paul is a quick learner because he realizes that's something to brag about. That's what you brag about there. In the second part of verse 9, he says, "Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me." And so God said, look, you are actually better off with that thorn, Paul. You are actually better off with that thorn, Robbie. It's beneficial for you to admit to your weaknesses. You're better off admitting or sharing and opening up and recognizing that, hey, you are human. You do make mistakes. You do need a God. Like, this is what we get this picture here. And so Paul, like I said, he is trying to show the Corinthians that his lesson, what he got to learn. And so he's explaining, like, look, don't threaten me with a good time. Yeah, I got this. I am weak. Yep, I'm weak. I've been through a lot. I have this thorn. I have this stumbling block. I've seen a lot. And if you haven't read 2 Corinthians 11, he goes through the laundry list of all the things that he's been through, all of it, a lot of it, probably not all of it. It's just probably he got tired of writing all the things that he had been through, for sure. And so he said, when I am weak, then I am strong. And so here is what we can do about that, right? When we have our story, when we share our story, when we open up about our story, this is actually what Paul is saying. It's like this boast is actually this act of humility. Because when we're trying to be strong, or when we think we're strong, we don't have room for God. And so this part, I have just two things for us to do, what we can learn from what Paul is sharing here to the Corinthians. And I want to warn you, it's not easy. It is not easy, but I promise you, it's going to be worth it. And so first part, own your story. What is hidden can't be healed. Did you know God already knows all the things about you? Did you know that, we spend so much time thinking that we have it figured out, or that, we can, how we look, how we dress, what we do, how we serve, how we lead, how we, check the boxes, that's actually, like, we think that's hiding us, or that's covering up what God actually knows about us. But he's actually waiting for us. He's waiting for us to trust him. So when we own our story, we're saying, we trust you, God, with even that part. The part, we can have fun with God. It's pretty awesome to have all of his blessings and receive that and walk in our purpose. All of that is awesome. But when we decide that we're going to give the dark parts of us, the parts that we try so hard to ignore, like, you just don't look it in its eye. No one will ever know, right? We get opportunity to own it. And then, and so I was like, when I was prepping for this, it had me thinking about my story and how there are parts of my story that I walked in a lot of shame. I walked in, and I'll demonstrate, I'll share when I owned my story. And it was several years ago. Like I said, I've been a part of Shoreline for 11 years, but before then, I grew up in church. I grew up in church. Like, my granddaddy helped to build our home church. My home church is the church my mom went to when she was a kid, and then we all went to that church. And when I was in middle school, what clicked for me, though, like where it became personal, was when my mom's baby sister, Sabina, had a brain aneurysm. And so she was a young adult. I was in 7th grade, and I looked up to her so much, right? I'm looking up to Aunt Sabina, she's awesome. She went to college and she's moved out of state. She's doing amazing things, right? But she had a brain aneurysm, and they told her that she only has 10% chance of living. She wouldn't have kids. She wouldn't get full use of her vocal cords again, right? Spoiler, all of that was untrue. All of that was untrue, but during her recovery, we wrote letters because she couldn't talk for a while, so I couldn't just call her and things like that. And so we wrote letters back and forth. And my Aunt Sabina just ministered to me so much about faith during that time. This woman that had a brain aneurysm, she's ministering to me and showing me, like, look how good God is. Look what he's doing. Here's my progress. And she's sharing her story and walking through her very painful journey while helping me connect to God in a real way. And so that was when it clicked for me personally, my love for Jesus. And so then I fast forward, we go through high school and we go to college. Y'all know I was hard-headed. I was just like the Corinthians. And I was, I knew that God was real and God was good, and I wanted to follow him, but I went crazy once I got out of the house. Yeah, I did. I went crazy. So I go to college, and I was directionless. There was a spell of depression. There was a spell of just darkness, and then I joined the military because that's what you do, right? You take all your issues and go get a weapon. And so I joined. That's not funny. I joined the military, and I was still searching for something. I'm telling you, I spent a lot of time searching for something during those years. And then I met my husband, and we were married. And our first year of marriage was full of shame, full of guilt, full of and he was gone for the first 8 months of our first year of marriage. And so I had to find a church. This was that moment where, this isn't the own it moment, but this was when I was like, okay, go back to what you know. So I'm like, I'm married, I have a newborn. What do you do? What do families do? Go to church. So my neighbor invited me to church, and I rode with them to church, and we found Shoreline Church. And once I was a part of Shoreline Church for a few months, I started serving, I started doing all the things, and but nobody, the shame and the guilt and the depression, and all that stuff that was inside of me, nobody knew that. It was like, how you move, you're able to, if you change cities, you can literally be a different person and nobody knows you, right? That's what was happening. I arrived in church. I'm a different person that they didn't know what I was actually going through personally. And so I joined a group called Catalyst. And Catalyst, we went through the study and we learned about living in freedom. And I had this revelation that I didn't believe I didn't believe in God the way I thought I did. And as someone who's been following Jesus or trying my best to follow Jesus for a while, I had that revelation I didn't believe that he loved me. I didn't believe that he forgave me. I didn't believe that I could have that new life that Pastor Quinn was praying about earlier. And I finally owned it. In that moment, and I'll never forget when my group leader in the hallway, we went to go pray after the group, and I just let it all out. I let it all out, and what a relief, what a weight lifted. She was so kind. And so I owned it. But the biggest part of that is I had to own it with God. I had to go to him and God, this is yours. Do something. Fix me. That's what own it looks like. And so from then on, I shared my group leader, and then I shared with Pastor Darlene, who was my mentor at that time, and she didn't know, I mean, you're with somebody all the time and they didn't know like the things that you're facing personally. And it got easier, right? And then once I went to Pastor Darlene, I shared with one of my very best friends at that time, and man, and I started to walk in freedom. And so once you own your story, again, that was the beginning stages of being healed. What is hidden cannot be healed. And so I own my story, and that's what I want you guys to do. I want for each one of us. And so after you own your story, you share your story. What is hidden can't help heal others. Okay? And so when we're sharing our story, it actually acts as a reflection of God's power. Your story becomes this platform for God to show people who he is and how much he loves us and the transformation. Like, because some of us, we all have access to the word. We all have access to the Bible. We read those words, but most of us, because we're human, we don't believe the words until we see someone we know or until we see someone we trust experience that same transformation. And so many of us probably here is afraid of rejection with sharing your story. I know I did, right? Where it's like, okay, if I tell them, what if they don't like me anymore? If I tell them, what if I can't do that anymore? Or I want to show you that when we fear rejection, that's between your story and owning your story. That's why you have to go to God first, because that's between you and him. And if they reject you, that's between him and them. Okay? That has nothing to do with you. And so we can cancel that out. That rejection thing doesn't matter, because with God, what can man do? Right? And so, like I said, it's not easy to share your story. It got easier as I shared it. People just want to see your humanity. They don't care like how articulate you are when you share your story, or how it's pieced together or whatever. Like they just want to know you. That's why. That's my light bulb moment. That's why when this girl was like, "Oh, you trip? Now we can be friends." She just wanted the real me. She wanted the imperfect me, and she wanted to have a relationship with me. And so when we share a story, it acts as a gateway to people who are far from God to know Jesus. And we just finished this semester of Rooted, and there's like 58 of us that went through Rooted, and it was so amazing because every week we took turns sharing our story. We went around, 58 of us went through it, but we had small groups. And so at my table, it was 6 of us. And each week, we took turns sharing our story, sharing the before Jesus parts of our story. And you might be someone that's in the before stage, right? You might not believe in Jesus right now. So we shared the before stage. Then we shared the commitment stage, where we decided to start following Jesus or rededicate our lives to Jesus. And then we shared the after of like what difference Jesus has made. And my group, I can only speak for my group, but they were fighting to not tell their story. Like there was one girl that was like, "I'll bring snacks every week if I don't have to tell my story." And we love food, so I thought about it. No, but they did not want to tell their stories. But when I say, after hearing those stories, I walked away from that 10-week experience more confident that God is real. And that's what happens when we share our story. It becomes evidence, more evidence, right? We're able to collect evidence that God is real, that God can do all things, that God is powerful, that he loves us, he wants best for us, only when we start sharing our story with one another. And so, I don't know. Who are you? What's your story? Are you ready to brag about it? Are you ready to be like Paul and start bragging about your story and sharing and opening up? Because it is in our story that we have the most capacity for God's power. It's in our story that we have the most access, or the largest platform for the good news. That's why we're all here. That's why we all show up to church every week, right? We want the good news, and we want people to experience that. And that's our part in what God is trying to do here on earth, right? When we share our story. And so if you were up here with me right now, I will hold your face in my hands, and I will remind you that God wants the real you, the weak you, the imperfect you, the most hot mess you can scrape up. He wants that, and he wants you to know that you are loved, you are wanted, you are valuable, you are beloved, you belong. He wants you. You know how I know? Because he did that to me. He did that for me in my life with my story. And so let's look at, this won't be on the screen, but I want to read this. This could have been my story in 1 Corinthians 1:26-31. Brothers and sisters, think of what you wore when you were called. Not many of you were wise by human standards. Not many were influential. Not many were born of or had a noble birth. But God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. God chose the lowly things of the world and the despised things and the things that are not to nullify the things that are, so that no one may boast before him. It is because of him that you are in Christ Jesus, who has become for us wisdom from God. That is our redemption, our righteousness, our holiness. Therefore, as it is written, let the one who boasts, boast in the Lord. And so this morning, that's the charge. That's the charge. We have this opportunity, this amazing opportunity, this amazing invitation and challenge to stop hiding, to start sharing our story, to use our story as evidence of just how powerful, how real, how good God is. Last week, when we were in all staff, Pastor Quinn was leading us in worship, and he started singing this song that I'm sure he made up. I'm sad he didn't write it for the Sunday, but he just over and over, he just started talking about more of you, less of me. More of you, less of me. More of you, less of me. And so let that be our prayer. God, we love you. Thank you so much for using us. We just want more of you, less of us. We believe, we stand here confident that you can use our story, and that you want what's best for us, that you will protect us, that we don't have to worry about rejection, we don't have to worry about fear or what people might say about us, or because I, honest to goodness, know that there's someone that will be connected to who you are, because if we are willing, if we are obedient to be vessels, if we are obedient to be a platform to provide more evidence of who you are and how good you are. And so, God, show us the people that we should be connecting with. Show us the people that we should talk to, who we can trust to share our story. And I pray as people receive stories, as we start, I believe there's going to be this movement of people that are sharing their stories, and we're going to be trustworthy, and we're going to hold space for each of our stories, and then we're just going to be a more connected and powerful collective, all because of you. And so we love you, we honor you, in Jesus' name.